So my name is McKenzie Courtney, and I am a long-term trainee in the LEND program this year. And I'm also a school psychologist. And so I had the opportunity to partake in research with Dr. Kelsey Oliver. And this research was funded by an Autism Speaks grant focusing on the experiences of general education teachers in low resource settings who include children with autism in their classrooms. Here's the HRSA disclaimer. So the information that I share with you today is not a position on behalf of the UC Davis Mind Institute, but rather just me as a trainee. So first I wanted to start off with some of the overall benefits of inclusion for those students with autism and also those typically developing students. So when compared to students who are in segregated classrooms, students with autism demonstrate stronger verbal communication skills, adaptive behavior, social skills, increased IQ scores, functional communication skills, and play skills. And then those typically developing students also demonstrate gains or strengths. So there's a positive impact on social emotional growth, also a more positive overall perception of disability, and there has been no effect on academic achievement to date. So a little bit of background on this study. General education teachers consistently report a lack of adequate training, knowledge, and support in order to effectively educate students with autism in their classrooms. And so these challenges are likely compounded in low resource schools where there's already possibly a lack of resources. But to date, there's been a significant gap in the research regarding the experience of these general education teachers who include children with autism in low resource schools. The purpose of this study was to gain an overall understanding of the facilitators and barriers of inclusion in low resource settings. And while the larger study looks at the use of evidence-based practices among these teachers, I focused on the training that was received and or needed by these teachers. So the outline of the study first started with the recruitment of teachers through statewide stakeholders, social media, and Mind Institute connections. And then we administered these surveys to teachers regarding their perceptions and their current practices. And then to gain more specific information about teachers' personal experiences, as well as the facilitators and barriers, we conducted focus groups. And all of this information will be used to inform future training for educators. So my specific research questions in this study were to understand what training teachers have received, how prepared do teachers feel in order to include children with autism, and then do teachers need more training, and in what specific areas do they need more training? So first, the recruitment started with distributing this flyer shown on the screen here. And so for this project, I will be reviewing the data from 22 participants in a survey and focus group. So each teacher had to meet criteria before participating in this study. So they had to be a current credentialed teacher in a low resource school setting, where at least 50% of the students received free and reduced lunch. They also had to be a teacher in California. They had to be a lead or the primary teacher in a general education classroom. And at least they had to have one student with autism in their class who received at least 50% of their instruction in the general education classroom. So for the majority of their day, they had to be in the general education setting. So here's the demographic information for the participants. So as I mentioned before, there were 22 teachers. The average years of experience among these teachers was 13.8 years. 13 different counties were represented in this study, and 66.6% of students on average received free and reduced lunch at these schools. And here's a distribution of the grades taught among these teachers. So there was a representation of teachers in grades kindergarten through 6th grade. 23% of these teachers taught multiple grades. For example, they reported teaching a blend classroom, like a 3rd and 4th grade classroom, or also teaching multiple subjects at a K through 8th school. And then 18% of these teachers taught kindergarten. So when looking at the survey, this survey questions were developed and adapted from the survey of educators' knowledge and value of research-based practices for students with autism, and a survey on educators' attitudes and perceptions towards inclusion. So first, when the teachers expressed interest in the study, the researchers determined whether the teachers met the criteria to participate, and if they did meet the criteria, that's when the survey was distributed to these teachers. So here are some of the results based on the survey. So what training experiences have teachers in low resource settings received pertaining to teaching students with autism? So 42% of these teachers reported on-the-job training. So this was either training that they received when they were first thrown into their teaching career, or it could have also been training that they received on the job in a prior position, such as being an instructional aide or a different teaching position. Also, there's 20% of teachers who reported no training. And then there were 12% that reported other. And in this category, they reported undergraduate coursework, autism-specific courses, or having a family member or friend with autism. The next question is looking at to what extent are teachers confident in including children with autism in their class, or to what extent do they desire more training? And so in blue, you can see here the level of confidence. In orange is the desire for more training. And so we can see that a lot of teachers agree or strongly agree to feeling confident in including children with autism, but they also desire more training. And so of note, you can see that in the strongly disagree and disagree, are there teachers who do not desire more training, and there are none. So we can see that teachers do desire more training, even though they may feel confident. But I wanted to know then, what skill area could we focus on if they need additional training? And so while overall they did want training in all of these domains that were provided in the survey, the number one was challenging or disruptive behavior. And then the second and third positions were tied for social skills and communication. You can also see in this graph that we could assume that general knowledge on autism in general is probably the least desired. And so I knew that teachers desired more training, but then I wanted to know how we can meet their needs if we were delivering this training. So what mode of training would be best for these teachers? So 48% of these teachers reported coaching was the most desirable form of training. And then 22% reported professional development from school. So coaching was really the most desired form. So then we conducted focus groups to gain more specific information. And these focus groups were 45 minutes through Zoom, and documents were sent to these participants prior to prepare them for the focus group. And each focus group consisted of 1 to 5 participants and at least one facilitator. And so through these focus groups, we shared vignettes and then asked them each of the teachers questions regarding the vignettes. So here is an example of one of the vignettes we shared. And so while we asked many questions about evidence-based practices, these are the questions that I focused on for my project. So would you need to adapt your current practices if this child were in your classroom? And if so, how? What barriers would you anticipate in including this child with autism? And what additional knowledge, training, or support would you need? And how would you go about obtaining this knowledge, and training, or support? So we then coded the transcribed focus groups, and we developed a code book with training needed and training received as an overall umbrella code, and then more specific codes under these general codes. So 2 researchers coded the data, and then we analyzed it using thematic analysis. And so with thematic analysis, we identified the frequency each teacher discussed the mode of training. And it is important to note when I share the next data that it's not necessarily the most valued form of training, but rather the most frequently mentioned. So when it comes to training needed, the number one form of training that was discussed is consulting with other professionals. So this teacher quoted using getting information from an ABA therapist. Other teachers mentioned a counselor. The second form was also consulting with parents, so asking questions about the strategies they use to support the student. And then the third is professional development. When looking at training received, again, the number one discussed was consulting with other professionals, and this teacher mentioned an education specialist. Also mentioned was administrators, counselors. The second was personal experience, such as having a family member with autism or a friend with autism and learning from them. And then the third was professional development. So based on this information, our goal is to disseminate this information through presentations and publications to inform future training for general education teachers in low resource settings. And so my recommendation based on the data collected would be to provide more coaching opportunities for teachers in low resource settings, specifically in the areas of challenging behavior, social skills, and communication. And there were a few limitations of the study. It was a relatively small sample size of 22 teachers, all of which were female. And it is also only representative of teachers in kindergarten through 6th grade. And so I wanted to thank you all so much for listening in today. Also a big thank you to all of the LEN faculty. I really have had an huge learning experience through the LEN program, and it's really been an honor to learn from you all this year. So thank you.